Home Sweet Home 201, Paranoia. Paranoia might be a bit justified here. World travelling via the goddess Aiko Akiyoshi was odd to say the least. It felt warm, fluffy, and almost as though he was being welcomed home by an extremely enthusiastic dog-cat hybrid. One that wanted to show him what they had done to his house while he was gone. It was weird and kind of unnerving, but he couldn't help but feel calm and almost content during the entire process. Some sort of mind control, maybe? The thought made a scary amount of sense. He would have to be wary of using Aiko as a method of travel in the future. It might end up being more than he bargained for, or simply entirely not worth it. She did say that he would need to do her favours every time she did it after all. So, yeah, not exactly something he was interested in doing repeatedly. When he arrived in the new world, he looked around the immediate area. It looked off. A strange colour that he had never really been able to quantify was missing, causing everything to look a slight bit grey. And on top of that, the feeling that he was surrounded at all times, the buzzing in the back of his mind that he might be watched at any moment, had somewhat vanished as well. The trees still looked like trees, the water in the nearby ocean still smelled like salt water, and the stones still felt like stones. But the world still felt rather dead. The paranoia in his mind grew. Something was wrong with this world. He wanted out already, and he had just got there. "Well, I'll be off," Aiko told him with a grin, flicking her 9 fluffy golden tails at him with a hint of amusement. "You should explore a little to the north. Maybe you'll find something good there." Yeah, no, that was not in his best interest. He was just going to wait for her to leave and then drink a luck potion, much safer that way. Soon she left them behind, and Tom took a flask from one of the chests and drank from it. A luck potion that was specifically tuned to not wear off for a rather long period of time, at the cost of providing a slightly smaller boost at once. That also had the beneficial effects of lowering the chance of addiction and removing most of the toxicity. At most, drinking 2 in a row would make you mildly drunk. Of course, the effects kicked in almost immediately, guiding him along a rocky path he might not have otherwise noticed. A path neatly hidden between a few berry bushes in the direction Aiko had looked as she left. That led along a very specific. "Oi, Tom, just wait for us," Jerry stated as the rest of the group made to catch up with him. "We can't exactly stay safe if we don't stay together." Harry Potter, the younger of the 2 tag-alongs, also piped up. "Yeah, Uncle Sirius always said it's no good to split the party." He thought about that for a second, and then he realised where he remembered that saying from. "Dungeons and Dragons?" Tom asked Sirius with a sigh. "Wizards of the Coast was run by the Black family for generations now," Sirius chuckled. "You'd be surprised just how many things they dabbled in." "I don't think you should be proud of that," Tom muttered, his voice low enough that none of them heard him. After all, with the way that company was run, there was some really sketchy things going on there. "Well, all right then. Come on," he told them, and lead them through the rather simple and mostly straight path through the bush. Once they were through it, they found themselves in front of... "Is that a Stargate?" Ashley asked in awe. "Yup," Tom nodded, walking up to the controls for the gate and pressing a few very important buttons. Once the rings locked in, he smirked. "And this is our way off the world." "Do you know where this leads to?" Sirius asked curiously. He was quite interested, but also a little wary. "Yeah, that leads to the alternate reality mirror," Tom explained with a small shake of his head. "Something we'll need to hurry to before something takes notice of us." "Shouldn't you get dressed first?" Ashley asked in worry, her eyes looking anywhere but him. He looked down at himself, naked. Great. "We can worry about that later," he told them with a sigh. "Let's just run through." With that said, he did exactly as he said he would do. He had full confidence that they would follow him either way, so he wasn't worried in the slightest. When they arrived on the other side of the Stargate, they followed him down the road to a strange building housing the mirror and went into it without saying a word. Luckily, it seemed no one was home. "Merlin's beard that was cold," Sirius exclaimed as he stumbled on the other side of the room. "How did you manage to go through all that without freezing your balls off?" "The rituals I've done make me a lot colder than that by default," Tom mentioned with a smirk. "Besides, there was a ritual I did in preparation for that makes me regenerate and adapt using my magic, and the other ritual I did only adds to that." "The Dragon Heart and Phoenix Ash ritual?" Sirius asked with a small chuckle. "Some people tried to do it with a phoenix feather, but that usually ends up being too powerful and causes them to explode in a ball of flame. I did feel a little warmer than usual after it, but when I did the second ritual immediately after, it went away entirely, Tom claimed, noting just how close he had come to killing himself and his family members. Turning to the reality mirror in the corner of the room, Tom sighed. He would need to stop himself from getting distracted and just get them all moving. "All right, I'm going to get us to touch this," he began, only to be interrupted by Sirius. Isn't that the quantum mirror? Not the alternate reality mirror?" the dark-haired man asked with a tilt of his head. "Same thing, really," Tom shook his head, not truly thinking about the implications of Sirius knowing these things just yet. "Anyway, this should do it," he claimed, pressing a series of buttons on a control panel hooked up to it to get them where they needed to go. "Follow me." And once they were on the other side, he noted that while the effects of the last world were still there, he had landed face to chest in the breasts of a beautiful silver-haired woman, while still entirely naked. "Ah, pervert," she claimed, tossing him off of her and into a nearby shower bench. The last thing he thought before he passed out was, why was there a reality viewing mirror in the washroom of a businesswoman? "Why did you pop out of my mirror?" the silver-haired woman, now clothed in her business suit and a pair of stylish glasses, asked. "How did you even fit in there?" "We didn't fit in there," Sirius explained with the air of someone who had been explaining it for a long time. "We were in another reality and it brought us here." The room she had set them up in was rather high class, with carpeted floors and a very comfortable bed covered in furry blankets. It somewhat reminded him of wolf pelts, but highly synthetic. Due to the sun being up outside, all the lighting in the room was off, but he assumed they would be interesting to see, especially because they looked like the RGB setup some streamers loved. "I'm never buying anything on Temu again," she groaned, palming her face in a way that made her chest nearly burst from her suit. Heaving a delicious sigh, the woman looked over them and poked Tom in the ribs, pushing him from where he was lying on the bed. It kind of hurt, actually. "I can tell you're awake, sir, so please stop staring at my tits," she told him politely. He sighed, getting up slowly and sitting perfectly across from her. "My apologies. It was just a little hard to focus considering what just happened," the silver-haired man exclaimed, rubbing his goatee. "Yes," she waved to his lower half, her silvery blue eyes showing exactly what she was looking at. "I can see that." "Oh, awkward." He covered himself with the blanket to spare the people in the room the embarrassment. "So, are you all really from another universe?" she asked him, as if thinking he would give her a completely different answer than his companions. "Yeah, we are," Tom nodded, but before he could get any further, an old man wearing an eye patch and a monocle burst into the room with armed guards, all petite females, mind you, and rushed to her, sighed. "Rossweiser, what is the source of this new energy? It's reversing the decay of the universe at a prodigious rate completely unheard of before." Maybe it was the mirror," she asked, not entirely sure. "Hold on. Let me use the scanner array to look." A magic circle appeared in her hand, the energy in her hand crackling as a strange sensation rushed through him entirely. It was not a pleasant feeling at all. In fact, it felt almost as though he was being infected with some sort of virus, one that spread throughout his system before he could so much as sneeze, and then vivisected at the speed of thought. If this was their form of magic, it was no wonder why the world felt so dead. "Ah, the readings coming from them are insane," she told her companions with a smile. "They all have bodies that adapt to everything the replicator nanoms do to look deeper and—" "You what, mate?" Jerry asked the question Tom was about to ask. Did you just infect us with nanomachines without our consent, in an attempt to replicate us?" You would already be breathing in replicator nanoms no matter what you do just by showing up here," she stated with a tilt of her head. "They are kind of a necessity to keep people healthy outside due to the state Midgard is in right now." The eye patch man nodded. "Don't worry, it's safe. We've been using them for millennia now, and the only thing they cannot fix with enough time if you get injured is if you're entirely vaporized. Fuck. If this world was that dangerous, he might have to look into another one." But after his last time through the reality mirror, and his use of the luck potion not making him lucky enough to avoid this much, he figured that this was probably the best outcome he could have hoped for. "I'm not sure if I should be worried that Tom would do another ritual to get us out of here, or even more worried that he would call for his goddess and use her like a taxi again," Ashley groaned, using her magic to calm herself. "Mum, this world is terrifying," Tom told her with a sigh, crossing his arms under his chest as he felt the fluffy blanket beneath him between his fingers. "We need to move on as soon as remotely possible." "I'm sure we can help you with that," The eye-patch man grinned, motioning with his cane towards the flat-screen TV in the corner of the room. It will just take us some time to study a method of travel between universes, and ensure it would be much safer for you in the end. He grinned, blinking his eye at them in an approximation of a wink. That is what you're all about, isn't it? Remaining safe? Huh. He had the odd feeling that despite how suspicious this man was, he was actually being pretty genuine in his attempts to help. He seemed like the type who liked to make all his words seem like they had deeper meaning, or turn them into innuendos, even when he didn't actually mean them to be a euphemism for something else. I don't trust you, and I'm going to be doing some tests of my own, but I don't think I can really afford to refuse your offer, Tom begrudgingly agreed. But what's in it for you? I get to feel slightly less guilty about having stolen all the data in your mind about your energy form and the existence of other worlds, as well as give you a bit of help in what is likely to be an epic journey along the way, the man claimed. They don't call me Odin, the all-knowing all-father, for being uninterested in learning about new things and exploring new ideas after all. Rossweiser, who had been surprisingly quiet the entire time, spoke up with a nod. I can take him under my wing, she told Odin with a thoughtful expression. He did show up in my bathroom after all. That he did, Odin chuckled. And with the way he looks at your womanly body, and never so much as glances at the rest of the Valkyrie maidens, I can tell that the way you cultivated your mind and magic over your body is much more appealing to him. Ha! She groaned. I get it. No need to tease me about it. Though she said this, her cheeks did turn a little pink, and she was beginning to pout a little at his remarks. It was somewhat cute, and he was beginning to see that she could be quite interesting as a person, and that there might just be some good depth to her in the end. That kind of made him sound like a real arsehole. He should actually try not to think like this in the future. It certainly wouldn't do him any favours at all. One of the Valkyries from the back snickered. Still a Christmas cake as always. You probably won't even be able to bed this one, so don't bother trying. That sounded like a challenge directed more at him than her, to be honest. But she took it harshly all the same. I'll find a boyfriend one day, and he'll be so much better than the cheap things you throw away, Gertrude. She teared up a little, balling her fists as she thought about her apparent rival's conquests. This might be worth looking into. Maybe there was some way he could get in her good graces. Maybe he would be able to ingratiate himself towards her, and she'd be more willing to help him along the way. It was certainly worth a thought at least. A small growl echoed throughout the room, causing everyone to look at young Harry. Ah, shit. Right. He was a growing boy and needed to eat. Ha, it seems your boy is hungry, Odin claimed with a massive grin. Come, tonight we shall feast and accept you into the halls of our people as new citizens. Wait, but even if you are to move on and enjoy your new lives elsewhere, so long as you need a home and do us no wrong, you will be accepted here, Odin claimed with a smile. Think of it as an apology for the invasion of privacy, and thanks for helping us solve a problem untold eons before it would have become a true issue. Well, with the way they burnt up all the magic in their world and replaced it with machines, he wasn't surprised that they would be glad now that they had slowly started passively generating more of it in some areas. The strange machines in every single material, and even the air they breathed, seemed to have figured out enough to start making minuscule amounts of it in every single nanom, and even had made the first generators by the looks of it in the room below them, something that had taken them only a few hours, at the absolute most. Absolutely ridiculous. He almost wondered if he would be allowed to make use of this himself, and if so, how he could do so. They did say that they were going to be made citizens after all. For now, let us dress you in more suited clothing for a feast, and then we will be off, he told them happily. You know what to do, ladies. Rossweiser stood and physically picked up Tom into her arms, carrying him towards a wardrobe like a certain longcat. Hey, I can walk, he told her with a shake of his head. He wasn't injured after all. He only wanted to luxuriate in the feeling of her rather comfortable bed a little longer. Yes, but this makes me look stronger in the eyes of the others, she whispered into his ear. So put up with it, and I'll do something nice for you later. Or something. Fine. With that, the Valkyries all dragged them off to get fitted and dressed, and then they were on their way. Home Sweet Home 202. The Feast. With a sharp intake of breath, Tom came to the realization that he was seated beside Rossweiss, at a long, luxurious wooden table. One absolutely filled to the edges of the table with meats, breads, cheeses, and both ale and mead for all of those present to consume. Wait, what? How did he arrive at this location? Had someone messed with his mind, the sanctity of his soul, in some attempt to control him? He cast a quick tempest charm in his mind, closing his eyes and allowing the time to read itself to him behind his eyelids. It showed both the local time in his time zone and his origin world's time for some reason, despite him being fairly sure that's not actually how that was supposed to work, so it only made him even more unsettled. "Oh, you finally with us, lad?" One of the rowdy bear-like men nearby chuckled, patting him on the shoulder. "I get it. It's not every day you get picked by Odin's right-hand woman to sit at her side." "I'm not that important," Rossweiser stuttered, taking a sip from a can of cheap-looking grape-flavoured soda. "I just help with the research and processing paperwork and, well..." "And telling people to fuck off on his behalf when he's busy fucking, aye," the man grinned. "Name's Bjorn Ironside." Now that Tom got a good look at the man, his pale, almost white-blonde hair reminded him a little of the Malfoy family, but he figured it would be an incredibly bad idea to mention that. He, at least, was dressed more casually, in what appeared to be fine furs and armour made specifically for sitting and feasting in. It still didn't help put him at ease, but he decided against his better judgment to reciprocate. Perhaps due to some sort of mind manipulation spell. Surely someone with such a rough and fearsome appearance couldn't actually have the charisma to match. It would be insane to even suggest such. Thomas Richard Harrison," he told the man, his hand being instantly clasped by the man and shaken roughly. "Well met, Tom," the man grinned, and then he laughed. "Now that we are acquainted, we shall wait for Odin to arrive and then feast while we regale each other with grand tales of our adventures among the realms, especially you, as the star of the show. Hell no." The word surprised even himself, but they felt oddly right at that moment. He knew almost instinctively that the sheer levels of embarrassment that would follow would be absolutely horrific, no matter the context. Hopefully he wasn't about to get smote for the insult that had left his lips. It would be incredibly embarrassing if he was killed in front of his family, not because of some external influences, but because he said something incredibly rude. Then again, it seemed as though the people gathered didn't mind much. "Ha ha 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 ha. You're funny," Bjorn smiled, enjoying Tom's presence despite, or perhaps because, of his words. "Don't worry. The worst we can do is laugh." Honestly, that's not very reassuring, Tom sighed. Sirius Black, as if hearing that there was some laughter to be had, perked up from next to him, opposite Rossweiser. "Don't worry. I have plenty of stories I can entertain everyone with." "Well then, you'll have to share them with us soon," Bjorn laughed, his smile wide and eager. Poor Rossweiser looked as though she would rather be anywhere but there, playing with her grape juice with a sigh. Of course Tom took that as any man should, a sign that she was in need of some comforting. And if it resulted in him gaining an ally for himself from this new world? Well, she did seem to be in a rather high-ranking position in this world. It would almost be perfect, honestly. If he managed to seduce her and turn her to his side as a loyal Valkyrie in the end, he might just be able to learn how the nanoms of this world worked. Maybe even learn how to make use of them to access restricted information that only she would have access to, as Odin's right-hand woman. Something he desperately desired, as if he was correct in his assumption. Odin would have a much better way off this cursed world. He needed that information. It was crucial that he learn every scrap of information before it was too late. If he didn't, who knows what would happen to him and his family? Rossweiser was a rather boring woman. She knew she was because that was all anyone ever said about her. So what if she would rather shop in discount stores and buy bargain deals, rather than spend her hard-earned credits on a hoard of useless and needlessly expensive items, things that would break down before they could get their money's worth? What did it matter if she was unwilling to drink alcohol after the last time she did so, due to how embarrassed she was at the results? And it wasn't her fault that all of her time spent training her mind and magic meant she became slightly fat. If people wanted to judge her for her need to eat more sugary treats to help keep her mana reserves up, she was only going to respond with how thoroughly she kicked their asses when it came to any spas or academic pursuits alike. Still, she was feeling rather down. She had made it a point to never drink, and she really wanted to stick by it, but what if her new Einar Jar thought ill of her for it? She had claimed him in front of Odin, a desperate move from a desperate woman made in the heat of the moment. It was just... he looked so good. Even though his skin was cold to the touch, his body reacted to her so fiercely as though her flabby body was something to be desired. For the first time in her life she was given a glimpse of hope, that she too might have appeal to a man of interest, someone physically appealing to the eyes, that a man that fit her taste might just be interested in her. That had never happened before. In all her centuries of living, men always preferred the slim, athletic bodies of her juniors over her own. It was absurd. Perhaps because he was from another world, no, another realm entirely, he seemed as though he actually liked the way she looked. His shortish length silver hair, so perfectly combed to perfection, screamed of a wealthy man who knew how to take care of himself. His beard, so neatly trimmed, seemed to draw her gaze every time he spoke, and gave him a gentlemanly vibe. If anything, she was of the opinion that his slightly soft yet clearly still powerful body was more appealing than the larger, more muscular bodies of all the other Einherjar seated at the table around them, and she had seen his everything, both the outside and what was underneath. She somewhat owed him a chance to enjoy himself for her intense peeking session, but she didn't know how to start. What were the things he even enjoyed? He certainly didn't seem to be enjoying the dinner so far. Even when Odin managed to drag himself away from his projects, sheepishly sitting in his throne in such a way that only she and his wife Frigga knew he felt bad, she felt that Tom was simply more annoyed rather than actually impressed. The man was already so similar to her, yet so different at the same time, like looking through a slightly warped mirror. But still, maybe she could take him for a more private discussion later. He seemed as though he would enjoy a bit of time to relax in a bubble bath, and she just happened to get some Epsom salts on sale. Hopefully that would be enough. As though he noticed her thoughts and mild considerations towards him, he reached out his hand and brushed it against her own, as though he was offering her to take it in hers. She smiled at this, and wrapped his cold hand in her much warmer one, happily humming as she ran her thumb over his knuckles. "I see you're also uncomfortable here," Tom told her. One side of his mouth quirked up into an awkward, yet polite smile. "If you wish, perhaps we might find a way to politely excuse ourselves sometime soon." She nodded. "I'll message Odin and ask if we can leave early. We will get our response if he tells the people we're allowed to take a small break for now," she told him with a smile of her own, leaning into him and enjoying his presence. He wrapped an arm around her, his fingers bushing against her thigh, gently as he spoke. "Of course. I hope it won't be too much trouble for you," he asked, his voice filled with sweetness and concern. Roswitha almost swooned. Tom was so considerate of her. "Don't worry, he will understand," Roswitha told him gently, pressing closer against his pleasantly cool body to distract from the strange heat she was feeling in her core. It only seemed to make it worse, but she was reluctant to pull away. "He and I have been lab partners and scientific colleagues for a very long time, allowing us to relax a little in private. He knows I sometimes need a breather and lets me take as long as I need." "Good to know," Tom told her with a nod of his head. "Then I will wait for you." Just as he said this, however, Odin raised a hand. "And now, we have a few guests whose story I would like to hear shared with us all tonight," he grinned, waving towards Sirius Black to speak. "Tell us, Sirius of Black, what tales can you share with us tonight?" he asked, the entire hall looking to the dark-haired man for a good story. "Well, I have a few," Sirius began, with Tom glaring at him furiously in response. "Then, care to share with us?" Odin asked, his singular eye filled with curiosity and glee. "Of course," Sirius said boisterously, his chest puffing out with self-importance. "You see, our latest journey began when Thomas Richard Harrison here saved me from a horrible prison known as Azkaban, where I was illegally held without trial," he began, his arms gesturing grandly in a way that seemed to set off her personal Einherjar even further. And for good reason too. She had almost managed to escape from the most embarrassing part of the feast, the storytelling part that always brought no small amount of shame to her every single time. It was even being used against her Einherjar at the worst time, but because it was Odin's will, she couldn't dare go against it. He, through cunning and wit, managed to catch the traitor to my family known as Peter Pettigrew, force him into a magical cage in his rather fitting animal form as a rat, and then brought him all the way down to the magical interrogators so the truth could be discovered once and for all. With that, he drank a bit of mead. From there, once I was freed, he saved my godson Harry Potter from his abusive home, where he was starved and beaten for the mere crime of being better than them in some way. His eyes were filled with rage as he thought of that for a moment, seeming to reminisce about it before continuing. Before I was mentally capable of calm and rational thought, as I had spent years being tormented by soul-sucking demons whose only purpose is to make one relive their worst nightmares. I demanded to see my godson and my saviour, without thinking of what consequences might come from such a thing, yet he remained patient with me, his wisdom and virtue allowing him to remain calm in the face of my panicked storm of emotions. Huh, and what happened from there? Odin asked, hoping for more details of their world. How did he manage to gain such magical strength and potency despite his young years? That would be because he was taken as an apprentice of a grand wizard, known as Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, Sirius exclaimed with a smile, regaling them of how Tom originally had much trouble fighting this man in a one-on-one duel. But as the days went on, it was clear that Tom was gaining the advantage rapidly, whether it be due to the ritual in his veins that turned his blood to a lethal, ever-spreading ice with the concept of adaptation, or even due to the opposing ritual he did at roughly the same time, that gave him the ability to regenerate even as his body was destroyed by the other. It was clear that nothing Dumbledore could throw at him would cause him to so much as sweat, giving the illusion that he never tired. In fact, because of this, as well as his ever-increasing skill in the art of magic thanks to my library of tomes, he managed to one day force the Grand Wizard to admit defeat in front of an entire dueling arena, even though he had enlisted the help of the reigning dueling champion to assist him in the duel, Sirius finished, a bright and sunny smile on his face. Most impressive. But surely there is more, Odin pressed. By this point, Tom already had buried his face in his hands. He was so thoroughly done with the conversation that Roswitha could feel it. Of course there is, Sirius boasted. Let me tell you about the time he used my house elf creature to gather up all the Horcruxes, pieces of an evil lich's soul, and used them to power his... I think that's quite enough, Sirius, Tom told him, his voice as cold as ice. Not every secret needs to be shared with people who we do not know nor trust. A few of the Vikings and Einherjar looked offended, but most were simply a tad disappointed. The only one who seemed to actually truly mind, however, was Loki, who had arrived late as always. She would have to look into it a bit more and make sure he didn't bother her choice of man. If she didn't, who knew what insanity he would pull in an attempt to impress his latest crush? Tom was not impressed by this absolute shitshow Odin had forced upon them. Sure, he had been openly accepted as part of the so-called Norse faction, alongside his family and his companions, but he wasn't actually sure he wanted to stick around after they had Sirius divulged so much of their past lives. And for what? Fame? Glory? Who needed such useless things in life? All he wanted was to survive, to live a life free of stress and enemies out for him, and raise a family on a peaceful world. A home he could call his own for generations to come, somewhere safe and not filled with spies. Roswitha led him from the room and back to her own with his family, showing them to the guest rooms in the strangely futuristic palace they had been confined to. Sure, he was told that they could go wherever they wanted within reason, but he was fairly sure that within reason did not extend to leaving the premises. After all, why else would they need to be guarded by their female warriors whenever they were out and about? At the very least, Roswitha was more than willing to let him use her lap as a pillow when they were told to visit the courtyard after he shut down their interrogation. And once he had cooled down, her fingers working through his hair gently as she watched him carefully for any signs of treason, they were let back in and told to have fun together, whatever that meant. So, Roswitha blushed, guiding him over to her computer station by her bed. Would you rather lay together, or play a game of some sort? She asked him curiously, her eyes focusing on him intently. He would have to choose wisely. If he asked to lay with her, she may take that as him being a perverted pig and decide to execute him with her, admittedly beautiful, thighs. On the other hand, that may have been exactly what she was testing him on, for if he could be manipulated by his lower head, allowing her to take control of him in some way, that would mean that laying with her would make her faction believe he could be used, which would help him in the long run if they thought he was so easily led along. Yet still, he had an image to uphold. What would you prefer? He asked her, allowing her to make the decision for the both of them. Well, I do have a game I got for free on the Steam store that I need to beat, she told him. How about we play it together? I can sit in your lap and you can control the mouse while I control the keyboard. What game is it? He asked with a small grin, enjoying the fact that she had essentially just told him, why not both? Oh, just a little game called Deep Rock Galactic. She smiled, pushing him down into her chair and taking a seat on top of him. This should at least help relieve some of your frustrations. She giggled. Oh, This was going to be a fun night. Home Sweet Home 2-03 to Tom. Meet Tom. The next day, when Tom had managed to get up from bed and make his way down to the bathroom for a shower, he was almost half expecting Ross Weiss to be there waiting for him. It was something he figured she might have been interested in sharing with him, based on their interactions last night. But instead she had simply left a note on his pillow, saying that she had to deal with an emergency in the labs and would be right back. It was comforting that she trusted him enough to leave him to his own devices, even if she had to run off in a hurry, based on the flash-printed note card on his pillow when he got back from his bath. But it still left him wondering if he, perhaps, was being watched nonetheless. So with nothing stopping him besides his own paranoia, he decided to test his luck. He remembered the password to her computer, so he logged in with ease. Then he began browsing through her reading material for potentially classified documents. Ones he could potentially say he innocently read, as part of going through her so-called magical studies. Perhaps there might be something of use to him in there. After all, this information seemed like something he could certainly use to help control the nanoms in the end. And as long as he wasn't connecting to the internet, or whatever passed for it, to search things up in this world, there would be essentially no search history of any type to incriminate him. With his mind set, he proceeded to accidentally stumble his way into her more incriminating folder. Her homework folder indeed. Every scientist had a homework folder to place their most recent studies. Also his grandchild, a biologist studying potential ways to modify human genetics, told him. That one was an odd field of study, requiring references for how Kemonomimi would mate, for the purpose of adding their abilities to humans. Strange, and since he now knew that yokai did actually exist, he no longer felt the need to question her on it. Tom knew that yokai partners would pass on their abilities to their children after all, so if his grandchild wanted to research how to make stronger humans for the sake of the future, he was all for it. He still wished she would have found better sources for her study material. It was simply not informative enough in the end. Still, when he opened Ross Weiss's homework folder, he found many more folders, one of which had his name on it. Thomas Richard Harrison, he chuckled, and there are already several documents in this one. I wonder what they could be about. He opened the first one and began to read. It was quite well written, if having absolutely nothing to do with any scientific notation he had ever heard of. Who, as a professional scientist, wrote a rather long document detailing the entirety of her thoughts on how she felt about him at any given moment, let alone one that discussed the desires within her heart to get to know him better. Well, it read more like a mid-tier fan fiction in the third-person limited perspective, about the things she'd like to have him do to her after their rather interesting night together than anything. Who knew? She might just have a rather interesting career as an author waiting for her if she tried. "Oh ho? Now isn't that interesting?" a man spoke up from beside him, his long black hair almost glinting in the light as he seemed to materialize from thin air. Tom sighed. Of course he was being watched. "You would spy on your new Valkyrie's porn folder?" the man teased. "Are you perhaps looking for tips on how to please her?" Tom saw an opportunity. Despite knowing full well that this wasn't a porn folder, it would be much simpler to explain it as such, and simply agree. Because if the god of lies was offering such an easy obfuscation for him to mess with Odin, he was going to take it. "Yes," Tom told him, looking into the green eyes of Tom Hiddleston's Loki. "I found it to be quite an interesting read." "Oh, tell me," Loki leaned in, smirking at the sight of Tom leaning back a little. "If you had to choose between enjoying the pleasure of Ross Weiss's thighs and going drinking with Odin when he demands it, for the glory of your house, what would you rather?" "I would rather simply lay back and allow Ross Weiss to pat my head while I lay face first in her thighs," Tom smirked. The woman was beautiful, and he felt absolutely zero shame in admitting it. "Ha ha ha, I knew we were alike," Loki smirked, pulling up a chair beside Tom from seemingly thin air. So many Asgardians, frost giants, and Vanir alike seemed to claim that honour and glory, that fame and fortune are more important than the simple things in life, the so-called god of trickery claimed with a smile. Like the feeling of a woman's body warming up the bed beside you, holding you gently as you drift off to sleep. "Then they simply do not know what they are missing," Tom nodded. "A beautiful woman with thick thighs and motherly appearance is truly all a man needs in life. Besides that, the only thing one needs is a safe place to call home and raise a large family filled with happiness and love." You speak the truth, my friend, Loki smiled. All too many of our people here forget these simple things, focusing instead on those who have not yet matured or have cultivated their bodies for war. He sighed. It is as if they don't see women for their ability to raise children, nor be a good lover, but instead simply see them as a bride of war. A battle bride at that. Tom shook his head, feeling Loki's pain from the years that this must have been going on. I will never understand those who cannot enjoy the feeling of a beautiful woman with a bountiful, mature body. Women with large chests and wide hips will always arouse me more than those who are small, with nothing much to show off in the end. Aye, that we can agree on, Loki smirked. Now do you believe me, Rossweiser? The woman, who had been hidden nearby, squeaked, and then she was revealed in all her glory, wearing a business suit as she peeked near the bedroom door. She stuttered, blushing furiously as she stumbled into the room. Yes? You're welcome, my favourite student, he grinned before standing to leave. I shall be cheering for you two, and I do wish to keep in contact when you decide to move on from this world, Tom. So please, at least stick around long enough for us to figure out a dimensional calling program of sorts for your nanoms. Tom realised then and there that he had possibly met someone he would be friends with for his entire life. Of course, he told Loki with a nod. I'll wait, for at least until I've learned what I can. Then I guess you should access my library, Loki smirked. It will be much more informative than what you can find here, and it's rather close to the palace, only a 40-minute walk by your standard units of time. He could work with that. If he was able to, perhaps he could even convince Rossweiser to come with him to the next world. After all, she was very much to his tastes, and was a high-level researcher who was apparently trained by Loki, correct? Wouldn't that then mean that she would be more than capable of helping him research things in the next world he went to? A topic of thought for another time, he supposed. But for now, he had a woman to seduce, and Loki had just given him a massive leg up. So, Rossweiser, are you free any time soon? Tom asked with a sly smile. Yes! And that was his answer. What would come next? He certainly hoped it was as fun as the night before. Well, how about we... The library was large and filled with countless rows of quality computers, a cafe where one could grab food while they read, and of course, books. It seemed that the sheer level of information they held about the various things available in their world, both mundane and not, was absolutely absurd. And of course, he was allowed to take any books he wanted from the library, as a new copy would simply manifest on the bookshelf where the last one was, should he remove one. Loki had even given him access to the restricted section, so long as Tom was there with Rossweiss, and they made use of the small nook there out of the way for them to cuddle. Something he was eager to do with the woman, as she was very much a beautiful lady, and she was incredibly cute when flustered. With how she seemed to smile and touch him gently as they spoke, her warm hands gliding over his legs as she lay back with him in their reclining couch while they lay together, he was almost unable to focus on the actual contents of the book. Fortunately for him, she was more than willing to read it to him, her sensual and mature voice caressing his ears with a soft timbre as she explained to him the concepts of how to call upon the nanoms of the world. The way they did magic in this world was nothing like the DXD-like overlay he would have expected when seeing Rossweiser. Instead, it seemed he would be able to use these nanoms, which were essentially replicators from Stargate but better, to generate the effects they desire on reality via special programs called code casts. These programs would essentially take in the data of the surrounding area and calculate the simplest way to achieve the desired effect based on the user's imagination and enact their desires on reality. As a side effect of it being a code-based magic system, it was prone to hacking, viruses, and straight up having your access denied if you were within the realm of a god and you didn't have their permission to cast that particular spell. As was expected of such a system, you generally had to obey the ones on top of the hierarchy, or get really fucking creative with your spells in order to get around the limitations, while also ensuring that no one figures out the exact method you use to get around it. Of course, this was all taught to him while Rossweiss sipped at a white chocolate mocha, her body snug against his own, as she read to him in the most seductive tone he had ever had the pleasure of hearing. His body shivered at her skilled seduction methods, his mind absorbing all the knowledge she offered him by sheer reflex and desire to prove himself worthy of making her his own. He was hooked, and he knew it. "So, Tom," she asked him, a cute tilt of her head as she finished her drink, Can you get your, house elf to refill my mug? She asked, a small smile on her face. I don't want to get up. Honestly, he didn't want her to get up either. Her perfect rear was positioned just right to feel comfortable on his legs, and the weight of her body pressing against him was rather nice. Of course, he took a moment to nod to Larry and have him pop down to the cafeteria to have it refilled. It was only then that he paused and realised he was so focused on his time with Rosweiss that he hadn't even noticed that she had been told about his house elves, or that one of them was nearby him in plain sight to make themselves useful to him as needed. How strange, though that did remind him of another thing he had neglected to notice. So, I just remembered, Tom began as he reached up and put a finger in the book. Did you take the alternate reality mirror out of your bathroom? Yeah, that was what caused the incident in the lab actually, she sighed. More people came through and caused a ruckus, shooting primitive slug throwers at the guards ineffectually when they were startled by Thor. What happened to them? Tom asked curiously, not entirely sure he would enjoy the result. Rosweiss sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Thor demanded they be imprisoned for harming Lady Sif, who had not even a scratch on her armour, because one of them got in a shot with an explosive that mildly stunned her and blinded her for all of a few seconds. She paused for a moment to take a breath before continuing. Some of them got away, but we have their leader within our containment cells until they come back to grab her. And if they don't? He asked curiously. Well, that's their problem, she shrugged. We can hold her as long as we want, so it's truly only going to harm their relationship with their own soldier. Tom noted that she had a hint of resentment as she said this, as though she was unapproving of the methods of confinement and control her people were showing here. Maybe if she's given something to do while she's there and good food, she will at least not be as likely to call for an assault that will only lead to ruin when she gets out, Tom asked. It was inevitable after all. This world had been infected by Stargate. If the rather optimistic nature of that universe, and the tropes contained within, didn't allow for their main characters to win somehow, he didn't know what would. It was just a thing that tended to happen after all. And he knew that he and the rest of Asgard would be considered capital V villains in this scenario, and likely any following scenario no matter what they did at this point. Even if they released her, they would be considered simply reformed villains, especially because Rossweiser had implied that she helped with that woman's capture, something that was not okay according to those people. Any chance we'll be interrupted here? Tom asked with a sigh, knowing full well what the chances were. They were pretty damn high. They shouldn't be able to, I mean... An alarm went off and Rossweiser was on her feet in an instant, a spell ready to fire. Oh shit, it's her. Fuck. His. Luck. HSH 2-04. And they're gone. For now. Oh shit, she's charging up her funky shit again. The leader, a man in nothing but a skin-tight armoured military suit, called out, lifting what looked to be a horrid mockery of an MP5. Yeah, no, he snapped his fingers, and Larry had their guns transported away from them in an instant, thankfully not being seen this time. Obviously he wasn't going to let Rossweiss be shot at. Fuck that. She was going to be his. The only one who could shoot their load into her was Tom himself. Wait, that sounded way worse in context when he thought about it. He might have a bit of a problem here. My gun. Shit. Let's get out. Yeah or no, Tom sighed, waving his wand and tying up the man, along with his 3 other non-important-looking members of the squad, in what was practically shibari. I am not going to deal with you people being stupid and loud in a library of all things. What? This is a library? The leader half yelled. I thought this was a military base. Sighing, Tom conjured a ball gag for each of them and shoved it in their mouths. Only the most special of morons could be this stupid. Well, 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 Loki grinned, stepping out of the shadows with a smile. When I was alerted that they had managed to breach my protections, I was expecting something more. Tom sighed. So you let them fuck around and find out? I had faith that you and Rossweiss were more than overkill to deal with them, especially after figuring out that they had simply used the wall of the nearby women's washroom and blew it out with plastic explosives, Loki told them with closed eyes. I was told that installing noise suppression on the washrooms was a bad idea, but I never thought that this would be the result. You installed noise suppression on the washrooms? Tom asked with a raised eyebrow before remembering the problem at hand. Never mind, that's not the issue right now, he said with a shake of his head. Indeed it isn't, Loki agreed with a smile, gesturing to the people on the ground. We should transport them back to their homeworld as soon as possible so that my brother doesn't get any stupid ideas. Well, that was a foreboding thought. Tom only hoped they would be able to make it in time. Sneaking through the halls of Valhalla with 4 morons and a prisoner was actually easier when one could simply shrink them and tuck them in a pocket. Tom almost wondered if Roswitha was a little too interested in the tiny people he had shoved into the largest pocket on her blazer, as the way she glanced down at it from time to time with a blush implied some rather unfortunate things. Oh well, it wasn't any of his business just yet. Not until she made it his business. After a while, Tom noticed that the halls they were walking through became highlighted in his vision, signs appearing where there were none, and fancy advertisements for various products scribbling themselves across the walls. Loki grinned, snapping his fingers to open a hidden door between 2 pillars. Well then, we're here, he grinned, a name tag appearing above him as he ushered them in with a smile. As soon as they were inside, Tom groaned, rubbing his eyes as he was forced to see memes and GIF images every time he looked at anything of note. It was incredibly annoying, and he just wanted to turn it off. Oh, yes, I see your cybernetics have finally settled in, Loki chuckled. Bad timing, but just sit down for a bit so they can calibrate. It will be fine. Ha, Tom groaned, brushing his silver hair with a grimace as he tried to steady himself. This is not something I was told about. You get used to it, Roswitha told him, putting the shrunken humans through the gate before undoing the spell remotely. I'm not sure if they will be completely all right, considering they were just shrunk with that strange magic style, but they should at least be able to get help over there. They'll be fine, the wizard in the room groaned. As long as you unshrank them properly, there will be no side effects on them. Are you sure? She asked with a tilt of her head. It seems a bit odd, because their mass seemed to disappear into nothing when you shrunk them. It's less that their mass actually disappeared and more that it was shoved into a metaphysical elsewhere, he sighed, his mind slowly getting used to the sheer mental bombardment of information he was going through. Loki watched this interaction with interest and seemed to smirk a little. I see we will have plenty to learn from each other, he chuckled, his arms coming up to rest behind his head as he disconnected the mirror from its power source with a flick of his thumb. But for now, why don't we do something a little more relaxing? The way he said that set off a few alarms in his mind, but Loki was quick to follow up on that statement. Honestly, your family surely misses you, and they would likely love to go for a swim with you in one of our many heated swimming pools. Huh. I would have almost thought they would be chilled, Tom joked, raising his eyebrow as he looked at them with a tired expression. We might be Norse, but that doesn't mean we're barbarians, Loki laughed. Those are reserved for the summer months. It's already autumn at this point. They guided him out of the area and back to the rooms near where Roswitha set them up to stay for a while. The rooms nearest her own room, placed conveniently near the postal room so she could go collect whatever bargain buy she had supposedly found online. Tom found it strange that he had an idea of what this woman was like so quickly, but she was surprisingly simple in the end, almost human in behaviour. It was clear to him that she was closer to the ideal human normal than he was in any case, something he found incredibly odd now that he stopped to think about it. Nothing in this world had given him any indicators that these Asgardians were anything other than humans at this point, despite their highly advanced technology. And while she claimed to be a Valkyrie, the only feats of hers he had seen in person were her superior intellect and her vastly enhanced reflexes beyond normal human capabilities. Thinking on such things seemed to help him refocus and regain his balance, so he continued to analyze information he had come to recognize since he'd arrived, until they made it back to the room he was supposed to stay in the night before, with his family and the 2 tag-alongs he had brought with him in the end. He almost wondered what exactly they had been doing this entire time. Perhaps he would ask them when he arrived. Harry Potter wouldn't consider himself the most normal of children. Sure, his uncles Sirius and Tom kept telling him that he was actually a lot more normal than the Dursleys were, and that those people were actually freaks that would burn in something called hell for all the things they did to him. But what even was a hell? It made him wonder if all of the people he knew these days were actually weird, and if being odd was actually somehow the normal he was looking for in the end. Maybe what the Dursleys thought of as normal was simply boring. Meh, he was sure Uncle Tom would tell him eventually. He may be busy a lot, but he usually made the time to sit down and explain things for him if he asked. Well, unless he was literally in the middle of something ridiculous. Then it might take a few minutes. Still, wasn't he supposed to come back last night? Harry wondered what had happened really. He brushed the remnants of the scar on his forehead, pushing his dark bangs out of the way as he thought about what he was going to do while his uncle Sirius tried to beat Bjorn in some game known as Call of Foxy. It was a strange game with foxes running around on a screen killing each other, like some sort of bloody war of fluffy beasts, and he wasn't interested in it in the slightest. There was once a fox woman here who told the world, "If you don't like your station in life, simply get good at this one game," Bjorn told Sirius, the large man grinning as Sirius died once again. Rumour has it, if you manage to get yourself enough kills without dying and become a nine-tailed fox in game, you get to become a fox on a peaceful world yourself. Uncle Sirius sighed, scratching at his curly hair with a look of slight annoyance. That's nice and all, but have you actually heard of anyone who got to that level? There was one actually, Bjorn smirked, and they're able to take the form of literally anything they want now, thanks to being something called a kitsune apparently. Really? Harry asked, looking at them in slight curiosity. Was it like that goddess Aiko? He might actually have to try playing it if it was. Yeah, apparently Loki managed to do it, and gained an absolute mastery over all things magic, as well as the ability to do a lot of things most thought impossible, he grinned, including convert all the replicators into nanoms and restore all of us to perfect, flawless physical form. Wait, if he did that, then why isn't he king? Harry asked, not entirely sure what was going on. Bjorn patted him on the head, casually, from here he sat, because in the end, none of us wanted the man who was so well known for having caused a massive schism between our people and for causing our downfall in the first place to lead us, even if he managed to get a sponsor who could fix us. Huh? Harry looked at his hands and then the controller. But before he could actually decide if he wanted to play or not, the door to their room opened, and Uncle Tom strode in, being held up by Rossweiss as though he was somewhat drunk. That wasn't a good sign. Uncle Vernon had been drunk a few times, so he knew that being drunk was very bad. "Hey!" he groaned, collapsing on the bed as soon as he was let go near it. Ugh, these new cybernetics are a pain to deal with. Cyber what? Was that a new form of drugs? Even Dudley said drugs were bad, and he was really dumb. Then again, he was dumb, so maybe they were good. Is that what was causing me a headache earlier? Mrs. Ashley asked in the corner of the room, swiping at some invisible bug only she could see. I thought I was just hallucinating at the strange menu at first, so I may have been going through it and discovered the shop function. Please tell me you didn't buy anything, Uncle Tom groaned, as though he heard something particularly bad. Ah, I bought a spaceship, she nodded. Apparently I had a lot of credits for helping in the kitchen for the next feast. And you managed to buy an entire spaceship? Uncle Tom blinked. For the equivalent of a catering job? It's the equivalent of catering for the king and queen, so yes, Mr. Jerry nodded, patting his wife on the shoulder as she began to blush. We'll still need to figure out some flying lessons though, as I doubt it can fly itself in an emergency. Well, I did come here to take you all off to the pool, but I think we have some things we need to sort out first, Uncle Tom told them, before letting Rossweiss sit beside him and put his head in her lap. This was going to be a long day, probably. HSH2-05. What's up, Choom? Once their cybernetics had fully settled in, and they were used to the near-constant feedback from literally everything in their surroundings, Tom noticed that a few people had taken note of the entire family that he would much rather not have anything to do with. Apparently, they had managed to capture the attention of Thor through Bjorn, as the man had talked up what a fun guy Sirius was, and told the oaf that they had contact with his brother Loki, something that seemed to make Thor jealous for some inexplicable reason, which apparently caused him to try invading their lives and personal space far too much for his liking. One of the more idiotic things he did was decide that Tom and Sirius should go with him to Midgard in his father's ship, known as the Bifrost, and go for drinks in a bar in a place called Kyotown, Japan. As if those words were somehow not concerning enough, he mentioned that they would be meeting up with a man known as the Red Dragon Emperor to enjoy the company of his daughters. It was only by sheer luck that he managed to convince the guy to teach him the easiest way to get back, or at least call for a ride to Asgard if things went horribly wrong. All because he mentioned it might not be the safest to drink alcoholic beverages and then drive through the hyperlanes in a small starship with barely any shields. Especially not one so fast that it would essentially arrive at any of the 9 major worlds at maximum speed in less time than it took to take a piss. Which was absolutely something he was going to be looking into at some point, because those worlds were so far apart from each other that they would not be visible with any telescope, not even the ones from a far future Earth. At least, not directly. Still, it might just be something interesting at least, even if Rossweiss was rather wary of letting him go. She even tried to challenge Thor on it, but he simply smacked her with his hammer before she was ready, grabbed Sirius and Tom, and flew off with them at speeds not suited for mortal comprehension. All that, only for them to immediately get lost upon touching down on Midgard, with Thor fucking off in some random direction, Sirius following a neon blue-haired cat girl with RGB braids, for some drugs, and him stumbling his way through the streets and trying to call literally anyone to take him back to Asgard. Needless to say, it wasn't working out. "Hey Choom, want to buy some deep-fried rats?" a street vendor called out from the side, a rather familiar-looking blonde woman making a beeline towards it as soon as the man said it. Tom shivered. He had the feeling he had just avoided a rather terrifying fate of some sort, and thus decided to make his way into the nearest available building to hide from whatever that woman was in the end. He entered the building, which looked to be a strange cross between a cafe and a medical tech emporium, and sighed. Well, it beats being out there right now, I think, he told himself, looking at the various displays in the building. Yeah, I know what you mean. A red-haired woman in the corner of the room sighed, sipping at a cup of coffee as she flicked a finger across a data slate of some sort. People out there are rough this time of night, and it can be a bit much for someone without a hell of a lot of chrome. And let me guess, Tom smirked. You just so happen to sell the best chrome around? The woman smirked. You could say that, she told him, but then simply sat back and relaxed a little. I'm actually on my break right now, but feel free to poke around and see if there might be anything you'd like, she told him with a small, confident smile. I can tell you're new to this, and probably don't even know how to use a cyberdeck yet, let alone a Sandovistan, but I can give you a bit of a rundown if you got the creds. Tom looked at the icon on the bottom half of his vision from the corner of his eye and compared it to the prices in the shop. I'd say I have enough to at least browse and see what's available, and maybe ask for a few tips, but not much more than that, he lied through his teeth. He knew he had more than enough to likely buy the shop's entire stock, considering they used the same currency, and apparently Thor had transferred a king's ransom to him for accidentally leaving him behind, but he wasn't exactly sure he should be saying something like that so openly here. It wasn't something he was used to saying, but it seemed as though claiming to have a lot of money in this world was simply asking to be killed for it. Heh, smart, but you should get a better cybersuite before you try lying about how much cash you have, she told him with a wink. Otherwise you'll just have your accounts drained for trying to be cute. Really? Well, shit. He was going to have to step up his game. Then what do you suggest? He asked with a humouring smile. What might be the best cybersuite I can get around here? Well, she stood, making her way over to him with a smirk. Don't tell anyone else this, but the best one I got is also actually the cheapest, she chuckled. The reason I can't sell it for shit is because it's a failed project that will cook you alive if you aren't hooked up to heavy heat sinks. She looked at him with a knowing smile. But that ain't a concern for you now, is it? I'll buy that, he sighed, but I have people I can trust to install it for me later. People indeed, she chuckled, but I won't tell anyone you're running Asgardian tech. That shit might be adaptive as hell, but it lacks the raw power and efficiency of Midgard tech, so keep that in mind. I see. He analysed the package one of her drones brought out. Anything else you recommend? I'll give you my last Sandy Series X for half off if you let me extract 100 mils of your blood, she told him with a lick of her lips. That shit could be the exact breakthrough I need on a better cooling system for my new mech, so I'm willing to offer that much at least. How about you give me the Sandovistan for free, and I give you 200 millilitres, he told her with a shrug. Sounds fair, right? You know what? Sure, the red-haired woman smiled. You aren't asking for install anyway, so it will make up for its own cost there. Of course, by the time they got that all sorted and payment processed, Thor came back with a drugged-up Sirius missing an arm and barged into the shop. Medic, we have need of assistance. Thor, you're paying a premium this time for interrupting my sales, she told him. But nonetheless, she got to work. What followed next was something Tom spent the next 4 hours drinking to forget the memory of, and thus is better off not openly discussed in polite conversation. HSH2-06. That was a fucking mess, Tom complained, walking with Sirius and Thor back into the halls of Valhalla. If that red-haired chick hadn't been there, Sirius would have died. Probably not, Thor grunted, his arm around Sirius. He has Asgardian nanums in his blood. They were simply dealing with the poisons in his bloodstream before they could repair his arm. Then why did Akane have to replace his arm? Tom pressed, his eyebrows furrowed as he poked holes in the larger man's logic. Whatever, Thor shoved him, showing that he was the type to resort to physical violence when people didn't agree with him. You didn't have to come. You had physically dragged me off and seriously injured Rossweiser, Tom snarked, his voice coming out in a growl. I was terrified for my life. You don't seem so terrified now, do you? Thor pressed, pushing him again as he dropped the still unsteady Sirius on the floor. That's enough, Thor, Odin called from the doorway, making his way down with a stern expression just as Tom began to ready a spell. How dare you bring harm to my guests, and then attack them for pointing out your own mistakes, he spat. The man and his Valkyries forming up and helping the two onto medical stretchers rapidly, in an attempt to start extracting them from the situation. Father, the man insulted my pride as a warrior. I demand a duel, Thor told Odin in an angry tone, looking to find any excuse to cause mass amounts of pain to Tom. Are you an idiot, my son? Odin asked with no small amounts of stress in his voice. Tom may be fragile as of yet, but he knows spells far more lethal than your favoured physical and lightning enhancement. Spells that can kill you immediately on contact. Be thankful that he didn't choose to murder you outright after you injured his Valkyrie. And then he put his spear tip against Thor's face with a grimace. As well as my best secretary, who I trained personally to deal with all the things I did not wish to deal with, who is still recovering from the injury you dealt to her. That was all he managed to hear before they were inside and out of range of Odin's wrath. Perhaps the guy could at least be given credit where credit was due. If he was willing to protect relative strangers from his belligerent son, who was the acting prince of an entire world, then he must at least have some form of integrity, and if not, well, it was too soon to truly judge. What wasn't too soon to judge, however, was that Thor was not someone he could trust, nor was he someone he could get along with in the end. If the blonde oafish bully was going to put his family in danger, then he was going to actively avoid the man for the rest of his time here, especially with how quickly he turned to violence being the answer for something as stupid as pride. How stupid did one have to be to pull something like this? It was absolutely the most ridiculous thing he had ever come across in his current life. He could have killed the one person that he had decided was to his liking in the entire realm, and the only thing stopping him from simply murdering the man on the spot was that he was indeed a prince of an entire planet. Tom was well aware that self-defense wouldn't matter as an excuse at that point, nor would the flimsy excuse of challenging him to a duel he would only cheat at, as evidenced by his attack on Rossweiser. In either case, it was almost by pure luck that he was dropped off directly next to Rossweiser in the medical bay, where he could see that she was mostly healed already. She simply had a small bruise left on her face that was being healed by her nanoms as she spoke to the medical staff. Of course I am furious! Thor is the one to set the dueling rules in the modern age, yet he can't even so much as stick to his own rules, she told the nurse with an aggravated sigh. Rubbing her face as the bruise went away, she turned to look at him and Sirius. It was clear from the look on her face that it was almost exactly as she had expected. And of course he brings them back injured. The absolute arse took them to Midgard, she shouted, her voice filled with worry as she teared up from all the stress. I'm supposed to be looking after Tom, so why can't the prince just let me do my job? Tom sighed and let her drag his head into her lap and brush her fingers through his hair. He almost wondered if now would be an appropriate time to kiss her thighs, or if that might come across as a bit inconsiderate due to the somewhat poor timing. She asked as he shifted unconsciously while he thought of it, her sharp senses catching him in the act. Just relax so that the nurses can check you over. We can cuddle a bit more later. Did she just give him the okay to snuggle with her as much as he wanted after he was cleared? Interesting. He'd have to make note of that for later. Yet still, he wanted to study the cybernetics he had received from Akan and find a way to use his nanoms to replicate the functionality, without being cut open to install them. It would be better that way, he figured. It seems your Einherjar is better than we expected, the nurse told them, but I wouldn't recommend installing Midgardian tech. It's extraordinarily unstable, even at the best of times, and has zero regard for any safety protocols. Don't worry, Tom smirked. I plan to reverse engineer these and replicate their best features with my nanoms instead of actually installing them. That way I can use their abilities without having the drawbacks inherent in their design. Okay, good luck with that, the nurse told him, clearly disapproving from her tone and expression, but unwilling to actually tell him no for some reason. Perhaps the nurse thought he was going to be unable to pull it off, or maybe she thought of Midgardian tech as lesser than what she was used to. Either way, it was of no real concern to him, so he let it go. Come on, Tom. Let's bring this to the lab so you can have some fun with it, Rossweiser told him with a smile, brushing her silver hair out of the way of her face. There might be something interesting we can learn from it, honestly. Tom nodded, feeling her shiver and rub her thighs together beneath him. Sounds like a good plan, he told her with a knowing smirk. Right, she squeaked, picking him up and setting him on the ground. Let's go! I see you've taken an interest in Midgardian tech, Loki said, smirking as he watched Tom from the sidelines while he worked. Yes, Tom nodded, taking apart the cybersuite bit by bit with his nanoms while he still had the time. Who knew when Thor would come back and cause a problem for him after all? It would be rather detrimental to his health to not have at least something to defend himself with. You know, Thor generally uses dwarven tech for his implants, Loki told him conversationally. And while it is rather low-tech in terms of processing ability, and is rather simplistic in its safeties and redundancies, it's quite a durable tech base. Tom nodded at that thought. Loki had essentially told him without telling him that Thor would be much easier to take out in a one-on-one fight via cyber warfare, which is exactly what Midgardian tech excelled at. Asgardian tech might be safer and more adaptable, but Midgardian tech was brutal and efficient from what he had learned so far. With Midgardian tech, you were definitely losing years off of your life with every day you had it running. However, with his extremely long lifespan, regeneration, and his blood's adaptive cold that could completely mitigate the heat generated by the tech, he was already perfectly suited to the tech. This was before you factored in the Asgardian tech integrated into him so thoroughly, that was constantly adapting to his blood as his blood adapted to it. The already much more robust nanoms that flowed through him would be able to replicate and install this Midgardian tech without a single flaw. There would be no need for external heat sinks in this tech, simply because his blood was far colder than anything that they could possibly create to cool off his cybersuite. And since this was the case, the biggest weakness of this setup was entirely mitigated. Normally he'd have to be essentially strapped to a suit several times his size, with heavy armour, just to keep himself from melting. However, because of these things he could essentially push the limits of his adaptation to simply outpace any heat it could possibly produce. This one is going in for sure, he told Loki with a small quirk of his lips. The dark-haired Asgardian smirked, running a hand through his hair as he leaned in. I'm sure that it is, however. He slung over a few modifications that would slim it down further and reduce overall energy consumption while improving responsiveness. You're still not ready to finish up and put it in? Study a bit longer and practice the program before you actively make use of it on yourself, Tom sighed. Back to the drawing board, it seemed. He took a look at the Sandevistan chip while he had the time, going over the code stored on it that seemed to have hardcore military-esque purpose. It was an operating system of sorts from the look of it, stored on a storage medium that looked to be designed to fail over time, corrupting the operating system chip and forcing it to back up on your brain. It also forced a backup of your brain onto your cyberware at all times. The cybersuite forced to host more and more of you, even as you replaced parts of it. Insidious, terrifying, and absolutely deliberate. Whoever came up with this was using it to back people up onto their servers remotely by force, even as it gave them so-called super skills and abilities. And it was common, specifically, among those who had enough money to afford paying for better and better gear. Suffice to say, he trashed the design of the chip and ripped through the code for anything useful he could find. Things that might be at least a little useful in the end. And in the end, he only found one thing. An overclock program that caused your mind to speed up so much that things around you seemed to flow in slow motion. He scanned through it, looking into it more and more, weighing the benefits and the costs of such a thing. On one hand, it would probably be a pretty good way to get in a more accurate shot for any ranged spells, and allow for better dodging if he learned more and trained his body and mind with it, and it would allow him to do more spell setup in a shorter amount of time. But the further he pushed it, the more damage he could do to his mind in the end. However, it would also be mostly mitigated by the rituals he had gone through so far, as long as he didn't decide to use the program too long, or for too often. The more he used it, the less he would be capable of actually using his mind intelligently, due to the severe backlash of the program, and he would inevitably end up in severe pain after each use, unless he could figure out a way to shove the load onto the cyberware instead. If he pushed it all into his cybersuite, he would have none of the backlash besides maybe a bit of overheating at times, and with that, I need to study dwarven tech next, he told Loki with a sigh. Is there a way to get a hold of some? Just beat my brother unconscious when he inevitably challenges you, and then rip the schematics from his mind, Loki told him with a shake of his head. Unfortunately, because you're associated with me, the dwarves won't want anything to do with you, unless you manage to somehow get the Red Dragon Emperor to take you to them himself, at which point they'll just pay you to leave. Huh, Tom thought about it for a second, and realized he didn't want to fight Thor head-on. You don't suppose you have a way to get in contact with this Red Dragon Emperor? Trust me, you don't want to get in contact with him, Loki warned him. He's a mimetic hazard that only thinks about getting his dick wet, regardless of gender, race, or consent. Ah, no wonder why the dwarves hated him so much. He would rather not potentially get shot at or smashed to bits for bringing their most hated enemy right to them. I will keep that in mind then, Tom agreed, and sent off a message to Rosweiss, who was out for a moment refreshing herself and grabbing them something to eat. It would be a good idea to see what she was bringing back after all. Hopefully it wasn't canned goods like flaked ham on a sandwich this time, though he commended her for being interested in trying new and cheaper foods. If it was, well, even Asgardians had DoorDash. HS Mike 2-07. Hindsight is better than no sight. On the morning a few days after Tom got back from his escapades with Thor, he was called in to speak with Odin in his office. It felt as though he was being called in by a school principal at this point, if he was being honest with himself, something that he wasn't eager to experience. Still, it wasn't as though he had done anything that was even mildly illegal in his mind, so he figured he should be safe. Probably. The man likely just wanted to either talk to him about what Thor did to him and make sure he was all right, or let him know that he had a project he was thinking of working on that required his assistance, something magic-related. As he walked up to the door, his recently upgraded cybernetics noted the digital sign on the door that warned him of an ongoing meeting, and with how he was supposed to be there within about half a minute, he was somewhat concerned. He had been told not to be late by Loki, so he wasn't sure if his new cybersuite had messed with the system clock he had within it beforehand. He checked the time with a Tempest charm while he had the chance, making sure that his time was properly in sync. A few seconds ticked by. It was indeed in sync, which meant he was still a few seconds early. At the exact moment he thought that, a click resounded through the neon wall of murals that passed for a door, a fact he'd been deliberately trying to ignore, and it opened to reveal Rosweiss in her usual business outfit, waving him in with a lopsided smile. Sorry about that, she told him, leaning forwards as though to let him see down the front of her suit. Odin wanted my opinion of you before the meeting, and we just finished now. Tom smiled appreciatively, giving her a good look as he made his way over to her. I hope it was a good opinion, he asked her, putting one hand into the pocket of the dress pants he was wearing and wrapping the other around her waist to grab her beautiful ass. An action he knew would help boost her confidence, and that she would appreciate in most circumstances. Rosweiss blushed, pressing herself against him as he kissed her on her cute little nose, before making his way into the office with her at his side. He didn't let go of her bottom, even in front of Odin, and the man seemed to give him a look of absolute approval at the show he was putting on. I see you and Rosweiss were a match made in Valhalla, Odin chuckled at the joke he made before continuing on with a small frown. Unfortunately, that's not why you were called here today. I figured that was the case, Tom sighed, taking a seat in the chair in front of the desk and pulling Rosweiss into his lap. She squirmed a little, but she seemed ultimately happy about the type of attention he was giving her. It was pretty cute, honestly. Of course, Odin grinned, flashing him a knowing grin before becoming serious once more. I heard from Thor that you had made a deal with Akane for your blood, the one-eyed old man claimed, rubbing his beard with a faraway look. Do you have any idea as to why this might be a bad thing to do? No, actually, Tom told him, feeling a little stumped. This world doesn't have magic that can use blood, from what I can tell, and my blood is much more likely to damage any equipment she uses it on, and potentially kill her, rather than be of any actual use to her. Ah, but here's the catch, Odin looked at him, poking him in the chest as he spoke. You have Asgardian nanoms within your blood, which have already adapted to your blood's adaptation rate, and which will stabilize any bodily fluids that exit your body so as to not allow them to cause mass harm unless you target a specific area with them. Tom thought about that for a minute, and then he realized what implications he was getting at. Sorry, he sighed, wondering how many toilet and sewer systems back on his old world he had destroyed without thinking of the consequences. It did suck that without his nanoms, he would have never been able to enjoy himself with a woman without turning her into an ice sculpture. That would have been devastating to learn. There is nothing we can do about it now, Odin told him, his eye watching the Valkyrie in Tom's lap as she rubbed her thigh against the younger man's own. Taking off his monocle, he pinched the bridge of his nose. There is nothing we can do about it because it's Akane, the nine-tailed fox of engineering and empires, No matter what, we've already handed her everything she needs to win this universe as one of her own factories at this point." "How so?" Tom asked, not quite understanding the scope of what he was just told. Odin looked at him with a sigh. "If the red-furred Akiyoshi sister, Akane, is in your universe, it's for one of two things," he told Tom, his eye filled with a hint of annoyance as he recalled something he probably didn't want to. One thing was the conquering of a universe to add to her omniversal empire for one reason or another, he groaned, dragging his hand across his face. And the other is to take a universe and use it as a resource generation and factory universe that would only create more and more products for the rest of her empire, no matter what stood in her way. Tom looked at him with wide eyes. "Oh, but how does my blood factor into this?" he asked, not sure where Odin was going with it. "Well, Akane was operating this realm as a bit of a challenge," he chuckled mirthlessly. "She would remain on Midgard so long as it was never harmed nor claimed by any other faction, and she would only work with what was sold to her rightfully within the bounds of the law, using all the materials within to create and upgrade her own tech base from which she could progress." And my blood had the Asgardian nanoms as well as magic in it, Tom realized, finally understanding just how much he'd fucked up. "Indeed," Odin sighed. "So, I would kindly ask that you take your family and leave this realm before you're caught up in her shenanigans, as she is not nearly as nice as your patron goddess." It was at that point that Tom realized the connection. "They're in the same pantheon, aren't they?" he asked Odin with a hint of panic, Rossweiss leaning back to look him in the eyes as his breathing hitched for just a moment. "They're sisters," Odin confirmed, "and I wouldn't be surprised if Aiko was trying to scout you for her family at this point." "Wait, what?" he asked, not entirely sure he had heard that correctly, because if he had, he might have just heard something terrifying. "I'm sure you heard me," Odin remarked dryly. "However, I have plenty of reason to believe this is the case." Tom nodded, and then he picked up Rossweiss and stood, carrying her bridal style. "I'm stealing your secretary when I leave," he told Odin with a tone of finality. "I will accept nothing less," Odin told him, just as serious. With that he smirked and made his way out the door to begin planning his next steps. On the way back to the room, he stopped at the sound of a slap, his mother Ashley crying out in pain as he opened the door. Of all the things, the one thing he did not expect to see in his room was Thor beating his mother. He saw red. Putting Rossweisser down, he pulled out his wand and readied a curse. Hopefully it would buy them some time to run. "You wench, when I say give me your keys, you don't ask how. You just do it," Thor yelled, and with that Tom fired his spell, transfiguring the dumbass into a slug. "Vile, disgusting piece of shit," Tom said, packing his things as he levitated the Asgardian prince out the window. "Begone from my sight." The slug was launched so fast that it zoomed off into the void of space, giving them enough time to get to the ship and run. Turning to his mother, he mended her face with a spell and helped her up. "We need to leave now," Tom told her with no small amount of worry in his tone. Rossweisser was already on it. "I'm going to grab your father and wards. They're in the training rooms. I'll meet you by your mother's ship." Ashley looked at them with wide eyes. "What can I do to help?" she asked with a hint of nervousness. "Don't worry, Mum, just follow my instructions and we'll get through this," Tom told her with a small, unsteady smile. It was clear that he was not convincing her, but they all left the room behind and slowly made their way along the highlighted path towards the space docks, making haste yet seeming unhurried so as to not draw suspicion. It was only when they got to the space dock, and the others were there, that the first alarms were raised. They managed to get into their ship while everyone looked the other way, with ample guidance from Rossweiss on how to enter. After all, if the Secretary of Odin was guiding them away, it was clearly more important than the alarms going off, and took priority, especially because Thor didn't have time to see his attackers, and the cameras apparently didn't see his face, so no one had a clue what was going on. They managed to clear the dock with Rossweiss's clearance, and escaped pretty far within a few short minutes. But that left one problem. "How are we going to escape? We can't keep running forever," Ashley asked, her husband Jerry holding her comfortingly in his arms. "I didn't realize Thor was such a bastard," Sirius groaned, palming his face with his silver metal hand. "Shite. What the bloody hell was that idiot on this time?" "I believe he was on a dwarven alcohol called Blue Rage," Loki told them, casually sipping a mug of coffee in a video call they did not initiate. "But don't worry, I called Aiko for you. Expect universal transfer in 3, 2, 1. The ship lurched, and a strange squelching sound echoed throughout the ship, before with a slurp they found themselves in front of Earth. Not too close, but close enough that they could settle down and scan it to see what was going on in that world at least. And what they found there was